Hello, everybody, and welcome to Down the Rabbit Hole with David Batdorf. This is episode 4. I don't have a fucking witty name for it. It's just going to be a bunch of horse shit anyway. It's usually what it is. But joining me, as always, for this lovely program, Mr. Pseudoscientist himself, David Batdorf. David.
Hey!
The other day I had come across, or David had come across the spear-wielding chimps video and sent that to me. I watched that the other day. I rewatched it today. And that is some interesting shit. You know, here we have creatures that we think of as animals. Now, granted, they're extremely close to us. They do a lot of things that are very human-like. But the thing that I think that science for a long time has said separates us from them is the fact that we use tools. And we're finding more and more that these primates that are not humans are using tools.
Even there's some like lesser monkeys that they find are using tools now and stuff like this. But you know, I take it back to like the Jane Goodall days, when the first time she saw a chimpanzee, who was it? Was a Frodo? I'd break a stick off and stick it into a termite mound and pull it out and eat the rewards of doing such a thing, like crafting a tool. And that was a tool in that sort of aspect, but. This, and some people are saying, well, this is just a larger aspect of that, except for the culture of the apes that they're looking at has nothing to do with the culture of the apes that are crafting these termite mound sticks. Now, the troop that is doing this might do both, but the fact that they are honing a sharp edge to pierce the body of a bush baby, like a lesser primate, right. That's crazy.
Yeah, and that was the thing that fascinated me, because when I started watching it, I'm like, yeah, they're breaking the sticks, but are they sharpening them? And then they fucking said, yeah, they're sharpening them. I'm like, all right, I'm in.
Yep. Yep. I mean, so there's, like even a crow can take. Like there's the hook test, the famous footage that's out there. Take a crow who's never tried to solve this problem before. They give a piece of wire to them to get a basket out of basically a beaker, and the crow immediately after a few missed tries bends a hook into the end of it and pulls it out. It had to imagine that piece of wire being something other than what it was and how they were going to utilize it. This is like crazy forethought. To think that a crow can do that and a chimpanzee cannot is kind of crazy. However, I mean, I want this bush baby. Not only am I going to just take the stick and like chase it out of there, no, I want it dead when it comes out. So I have to get a stick. It's got to be a straight stick. It's got to be long enough so that my arm and hand stays away from harm. And then I'm going to hone the edge with my teeth until it becomes a point that I can stick into the bush baby. That's crazy.
Yeah, that in and of itself was the part of that video that caught me. It wasn't the fact that, they were showing the chimps breaking off sticks and using the sticks. Mm-hmm. It was the fact that they were sharpening them.
Yeah. You're not taking something like a rock and using it to open a hard nut or something like that. Like we've showing like they use either logs or rocks to open hard nuts. That's easy. It's taking something that's heavy and big and harder than your hand and using that to your advantage. That's fine. But to take that rock and to like start napping it until you get pieces of sharp flint coming off. Now that's that next step, and that's to a more extreme extent what the chimps are doing in this one particular area. And it's not all chimps. You got to know that this is not all chimps. This is in a very particular area and a very particular set of environmental stresses, which the really cool thing about this for me is that these are savanna chimps.
Right.
They're living outside of the dense forest in more open grasslands, and they have to utilize more proteins than the herbivores and the frugivores of the dense jungle forest. And that's exactly how our human ancestors started to develop processes like this.
Right. And this goes into what we wanted to talk about tonight. The other thing that you had sent me was the chimps that are now looking both ways to cross the road. And
Yeah,
and that
I
is
love that all this stuff comes out this week, so we have so much to talk about on the show. It's perfect.
right. So my thing on this was I had just watched this documentary / propaganda crap, which I had sent to you. I don't know if you got a chance to listen to it / watch it. A lot of it was propaganda. However, there's a lot of interesting facts in there about evolution, about environmental effects on evolution, and how our environment is much more of a factor in our evolution than our genetics. And I tend to agree. Because, okay, here you have these chimps that if there wasn't a fucking road with cars, they wouldn't be doing this. And now now maybe this is a social or cultural evolution that they're going through. It's not so much a genetic thing, but it is in time going to change them.
Behavior and evolution is just as important as like the environmental stresses and evolution. The strongest will survive. The chimps that look both ways aren't going to get hit by cars, So, but the interesting thing about the cultural evolution is, the learning aspects of culture, and again, separating the chimpanzees from other animals a little bit, there is a watching, learning type of scenario there. It's not an active teaching as much as a watching, learning, and that happens more so in the really cognitive animals, like we say elephants and dolphins, and you watch how to do it and then you try to recreate it. Monkey see, monkey do, right? Well, so that sort of cultural aspect is really interesting, but it's really highly varied in the chimpanzees, where different tribes have different cultural adaptations that have just all the chimps that grow up in this troop learn this one trick because everybody's doing the trick because that's what they've learned. And it's really kind of an interesting well,
if you look at humans, we do the same shit.
That's why it's an interesting microcosm of the cultural anthropology in humans, because that's what we've done. But this is on a scale that we can really kind of watch and test, where it gets a lot more complicated in our modern society. It's hard to really go back and look at that with any sort of objectivity. But you can do it in the chimpanzees, and it really could teach us a lot about ourselves too.
Right. So and I would take it to this. Okay. So you've got humans that have fucking internet and electricity, and they go to fucking work every day. And then you've got fucking humans who still live in the jungle.
Mm-hmm.
They're the same fucking thing. They are the exact same species. They have the exact same capabilities. You could take a fucking baby from that jungle, put it into our society, and it would grow up and be able to do exactly everything that we can do. And
vice versa.
Exactly. And vice versa. They're no different except for culturally. And that in and of itself is part of evolution. Now, over time, I think that those things will change the different peoples. If we were to stay separate from those jungle peoples, for millions and millions of years, eventually you would see change.
Well, even like hundreds of thousands of years. Well, I always take it back to the mitochondrial Eve. Like, really, not much more than we're looking at pennies over 180,000 years of being our own species, right? Like as we are today, currently. And so that's a drop in the bucket. If you think about a million years of evolution, I mean, that's 5 times as long as it took to make people as varied as we are culturally and physically around the globe. But we are all the same. We're not reaching that speciation level at this point.
Right. We can interbreed with Asians, and we can interbreed with African Americans or Africans, for that matter.
And the way that we're kind of that modern culture and transport is like we're becoming more homogenous than we were before, which is could actually really work out well for genetic diversity, especially for some of us white folk who don't have as much genetic diversity. You know, like
we're the assholes.
Like that, yeah. So that's really possibly a good thing, but that's also like an evolutionary thing, like our cultural, technological, and travel based culture, and the fact that we're breaking down these racial barriers in our culture allows us to actually better our genetics, honestly.
Yeah, it allows us to diversify.
Yeah. But and actually, homogenizes maybe the, like over the next 100,000 years, the look and the differences and cultural differences between humans. But then you kind of like, you think like, wow, is that like a utopian thing? Blah, I'm going a little hippie trippy here, but like that's, but those are the really complex things. But if you look back at those chimpanzee troops, it's a very honest and real look at those sort of cultural traits. And I mean, was the billy ape just simply they got so big because the strong had to survive because maybe they didn't have these tools and they weren't using some of these other things, so they had to use size and strength versus their neighbors that were making spears and carving primates out of tree holes. I mean, that's
yeah. and
so
it begs a lot of questions about what is culture, what is society, and how does evolution affect these things?
I'm trying to think of how to put this. Like society and culture are kind of, they're different, but the same.
Right.
But culture almost needs a. You need to be able to identify and shape it at some point where, like a society, you think of like the caste system within wolves is very, they work themselves into all of these scenarios, like, into this like order, the pecking order, and, who's the alpha, who's the next in line, who's just, Joe Schmo, and who's the outcast. Okay. They work out these things, but it's through kind of this brute force versus just the way that chimpanzees have to go about that is just it's a phenomenally complex what would you like
there's more factors in a chimpanzee society than there are in a wolf society.
Well,
if we were to look at them if we were to look at them as societies, a chimpanzee is, I'm not saying that dogs don't think or that wolves don't think, but a chimpanzee has far more capability to extrapolate and to create. Obviously,
to think into the future. Also, like they're making quote unquote like diplomatic decisions with a lot of things that they're doing in the caste order. But there's other things at play too. That maybe that's the difference between like a social order like wolves have and a cultural order which chimpanzees have. Is there's more than just this one sort of struggle going on. It's a multifaceted thing, but the culture are the things that are different from the troop next door. Like there's this whole same kind of setup, this caste, like this pecking order, but next door they decided in a completely different way, and they factor it on 5 different levels where they're doing it. Crazy to think on how complex that system is, and it's not that much unlike a lot of our own systems. It's just, again, it's honest, it's natural, and it's simple.
It's base level.
Yeah. It doesn't have language, and it doesn't have like abstract, but it has like altruism and all these other things that like sympathy and empathy and other things like that involved. Where in the wolf society, it doesn't have any of those really complex so I mean emotions and projections that chimpanzees do. And so the fact that I mean they're doing all these things, they're making and crafting tools in some instances, and that's just because we witnessed this. Like, this troop had been doing this probably for hundreds of years. They didn't just start doing this in front of the scientists.
Right.
The scientists didn't teach them how to do this. We finally got onto a troop, and we watched it for long enough to where they did this, and we're like, holy shit, did you see that? Wait, did you see that 50 more times? No, that's a real thing.
Yeah, it wasn't just a fluke.
The interesting part to me, like, when you talk about the society, because of the way that the society works, and the males are more likely to, exude their dominance and take food, the females were like 70% more likely to use this, to create and use the spears to catch the food, as males were. Males rarely did it, and the females were doing it a lot.
Yeah, because the one that they had showed there initially in the video was a female.
It had a baby on its back. Yeah. It was and it was making the spear and going to go to town. They didn't show the actual, disembowelment or whatnot. Well, I remember. But there's a picture later of the dead, corpse hanging there. Yeah.
Right, but that particular instance that they showed in the video, they said that she didn't succeed that time, that she had tried. But I just found it totally fascinating that how the environment will affect different, bands or tribes, whatever you want to fucking call them, of chimps. And they're all pretty much the same fucking thing.
And they all have pretty much the same abilities, and it depends on your skill set. If you're living, we call them upriver folk here, if you're living up in the mountains, you're going to need a different skill set than in the city. And culturally, there is a difference between, the big city folk and the rural folk. I mean, there's a cultural difference.
Exactly.
And it's plain to see, but they're the same people, and some of them, they even go to the same schools in some instances, and
you may be
and they clash, and they don't get along, and it's crazy.
And I would take it to this, okay? That show there, Life Below Zero. Have you ever heard of this show? These people that live up in the fucking Arctic Circle or wherever the fuck it is. Okay, so you could take a person from down here, and you could stick them up there, and it's very possible that they could survive. It is within the realm of possibility. However, it's going to be a lot harder for that person who has no skill set and no prior knowledge of how to survive there. It's going to take those people a lot more to survive than someone who has the skill set, who has lived there, and who knows what the fuck they're doing.
The culture of learning in that situation, we'll take it into this. The culture of learning in that situation, one of them is survival, hunting, fishing, how to skin a seal, versus the Constitution and Civil War reenactments and that there's a huge cultural difference between areas and humans, and to see that in chimpanzees is amazing, because they really do live in a very small part of our world, but it's a perfect analogy for the evolution of culture, and some people don't like to admit that. They don't like to admit that they do a lot of the exact same things. They don't have a lot of the cognitive abilities, and they don't have the speech abilities, and they don't have a lot of things that we have, and that's fine. But what they do have that's the same is really important. Jeffrey Kelly and I on the Squatch Lounge podcast all the time talk about, it's not what makes us like the same that's important. It's what makes us different. That's what makes us human. So it's not yes, there's all these things that are the same. People are afraid of giving chimpanzees culture and giving chimpanzees this and giving chimpanzees that. But it's the more we give to them in a reasonable way, not just mamby-pamby. It's okay, well, no, scientifically, we can say beyond a shadow of a doubt that they can do this. And so that's not what defines us as human. The more we do that, the more we define ourselves as what we are as human. And the more that we do that, the more special we become. Even it's kind of crazy. So I don't understand the people that really put a hand up. It's like, no, I am not gonna even listen to you talking about a chimpanzee being able to do this. Like, no, they fucking do it, dude. Like, if you go out there in the fucking forest, chimpanzees doing that. I don't care what you believe or whatnot. It's like they're doing that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And here's my thing that has bothered me for years is I will have arguments with people who hate the idea of evolution. They're either creationists or whatever they are. And, I think evolution is, be it a maybe flawed system in some ways, and I'm not saying that it's wrong. I'm saying that the way people look at it may be a little wrong.
The way that we taught it even 15 years ago is pretty incorrect.
Right.
And what we learned by rehashing and kind of putting a better spin on things is that it's incomplete.
Right.
It's not incorrect. It's just incomplete. So we take the best knowledge that we have right now and are willing to change it when better information comes along.
Right. And the argument,
like a chimpanzee fashioning a spear out of a stick that they tore off of a tree to do something specific with it. That's that's a tool. This is not like some sort they didn't just pick up a rock and smash something with it. They saw a bush baby go into that hole, and then they tore a branch off, made a sharp point, and then stabbed it into the bush baby. How much more tool do you need than that?
Right. Well, the thing that bothers me about that argument is that they will always go to, well, how come chimpanzees are still in the woods? Well, you fucking asshole, because that's where they evolved.
Yeah. Well, do you understand that the only reason that we came out of the woods was that the woods left us? There wasn't enough room for us in the woods.
Right. So we had to adapt. And the chimpanzees adapted where they were. Now, here's my take on that whole thing. These people think, oh, well, they're a lesser fucking being. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. All right, yeah, sure. Okay, yeah, they're a fucking animal. Yeah, okay. Now let's stick you in the fucking woods with a loincloth and you survive. I bet you that fucking chimpanzee is going to have a better chance than you.
Yep. And if you ate that many pigs, you'd be shitting for days. You died dehydration before you even found water.
Right. I mean, it just baffles me that these people think that we're just such the higher life form. It's like, really? Okay, I'm going to drop you in the fucking jungle. In the middle of the fucking jungle. With nothing but a fucking loincloth. Now live.
Yeah, live. I'll even tell you what to eat. Like, you eat what they eat.
I'll let you.
That's fine.
I'll let you research a little bit before you go.
Yeah, you can eat everything that they eat, and you know what? You won't be able to digest it or get any nutrients out of it. And matter of fact, it will turn your poop into soup, and you'll lose all the fluids in your body. You're not evolved to survive there. You know why? Because you evolved in a different environment, and that's why the chimpanzees are in trouble, is because they're locked into the evolution of their environment. It's not even that it was a niche. It's just like that's just been shrinking forever, and they've just been dealing with it and getting smaller and smaller and smaller as a population, where we made a different decision. And it's not even that we made a different decision. We'd already split off from them and gone our separate way, and we already made some changes, and then all of a sudden, here we are, faced with a vast grassland savanna and shrinking forests, like, to the future!
Yeah, exactly. And like, I don't see chimpanzees so much as a lower life form. I just don't, and I think a lot of these people do. They are adapted very well for their environment, and they can survive very well in their environment. They do fabulous. Left to their own devices, if we weren't fucking up their habitat, they'd do fine. And you know what? At some point in time, they probably would evolve beyond what they are.
Yeah, but what is that? Like the stresses that they have? Like, let's just say that we just stopped deforestation and bushmeat and everything that we're doing right now, and just let them keep their numbers, propagate whatever they can do with what's left. what are they going to evolve into? They're going to become more the chimp. They're not going to become people.
No.
Like, that's not the end goal for them. So I think that people misunderstand evolution is like, because you always see it. It ends up at us. Even all the trees, the phylogenetic trees that we put together have us at the fucking end. So, we're still on the journey too. Like, put us somewhere in the middle, just in the mess of things. That's why I like that the family tree wheel that they've done, and it kind of separates everything into fungus, bacteria, virus, plants and animals, and we're just like out on the end of what's living now.
Right. Because to put us at the very end makes us look like the end goal of what this all is. It makes us over important, in my opinion. And that brings me to the other thing that I wanted to discuss tonight, which was in that documentary that, we both, or fucking whatever the fuck that thing was. I don't even know what to call it. But the fact that we as a planet are more one organism than we are many. And the fact that we live on this planet symbiotically. And to deny that is folly. It's complete fucking folly. Because if history has taught us anything, it's that if you fuck up one section of the ecosystem, other parts will fucking suffer. Like, I look at that fucking, the Fukushima radiation that's just fucking spilling into the Pacific Ocean, and I'm like, what the fuck is that gonna do? Not now, but fucking 100 years from now.
1,000 years from now. 10,000 years
exactly.
from now.
How much of an impact is that going to have later on? Because we're all living on this planet together. So that's the fucking the truth. Like, we're not really leaving. Like, we go up into space, but we're not going anywhere.
Yeah. Well, you think like those long-term impacts. Like, think of when did we become like the plastic society? Was that like somewhere between the 60s, 70s? We started putting everything, like, moving away from glass and tin and aluminum and going to plastic. And by the 80s, you're there, right? So really, most of the damage that we've done with the plastics, and thinking back to the Pacific Ocean and the Great Garbage Patch, like the plastic island, like, that's been done in the last 30 or 40 years. The impacts of that are changing ocean currents and global temperatures, and and acid levels and all these other things. Like,
and fish are eating all kinds of plastic because they can't avoid it.
Yeah, well, not even that. Like, just the actual drag that it's creating is changing the climate. Like, on the way that the currents move and everything, it's so gigantic. I mean, you can't even really put your mind around how large this thing is. But that's been done so recently, like, that it's already had an effect, and it continues to have an effect. And so the crazy thing is, like, when you look at every species on an individual level, they're all different, and they're all fascinating, they're all wonderful, and yes, we have some really special things about us that allow us to do a lot of crazy things. But especially with our cognitive abilities, you have to understand that we are a part of a bigger system.
Oh yeah, we're
and to identify that, like,
if you ask me, David, whether the Earth is one organism.
If you treated it like that, and like it is one system, I mean, that's the proper way to treat it. Now whether it is or not, I know that there's some hyperbole, like,
Oh, it's a hippie theory, man.
Yeah, but if you were to approach the fact that everything we do is part of a larger system, and how is that going to affect that system? Well, hindsight being 2020, yeah, fuck us, right? But yeah, I mean, like, it's crazy, So our technology, we've gone from spear wielder to the absolute, like, destroyer of all things natural. It's crazy.
We're people that drop bombs that just level cities now.
Yeah, just because we can. Or we test those bombs over the fucking ocean for no reason. Like, okay, so there's this thing called nuclear fallout that we didn't really understand until a whole lot later. And yeah, that just settles in the ocean. It's no big deal.
Yeah, no, don't worry about that. Yeah, the water covered it up, David.
Coral atoll, no.
Don't worry about those people on those islands.
Yeah.
It's
They're
all right.
island folk.
But I'd watched this damn thing, and like I said, it was full of propaganda, and it was very much a, you can change your life type of thing. But there were a lot of very interesting facts in there, and I agree with the idea that we are this, the Earth is, obviously it's an ecosystem. It's all one thing. Whether we want to admit it or not, we're all dependent upon one another. I hate to, because I hate the fucking movie, but, I hate to reference It's a Wonderful Life, but, that kind of shows that impact that one person can have, on the whole, but that it's still a whole. And that it's everything. So, you have to look at the parts and the whole. And I just, when I was watching that, I was, I wasn't really blown away. But the idea that we look at all these things on a singular level. We look at it as like, oh, the black rhino's gone. Okay, well, the fucking black rhino's gone, but what were the fucking 15,000 things that led up to that? On the global scale.
Were they in our control or were they outside of our control? It looks as if there is, and people have looked into this just because they're, you go crazy and you start to think of things, once people realize that we could clone a woolly mammoth, which we're not going to clone the woolly mammoth, by the way, where's the habitat that's viable? There's viable habitat. We could have tens of thousands of woolly mammoth in the Arctic areas, and in Greenland and in other areas. It's viable habitat that could support that livestock.
Right.
So we shouldn't bring them back, just to marvel at our own magnificence.
Just to fill those ecosystems.
Yeah, just to marvel at ourselves, like, oh man, we are good. But the whole point of that is that there's still environment that they should be, and enough to support tens of thousands of them. But we nearly destroyed probably the most prolific ungulate on the face of the planet, if not just North America. It was the wild North American buffalo.
Oh yeah,
and that only took us like 100 years to wipe it out.
We fucked that up so bad. I look at those pictures of those hunters with just piles of fucking buffalo hide. It's just like, holy shit.
Yeah. It's so again, to marvel at our own magnificence, magnificence. Like, is that sorry, we're going down a dark hole here.
Yeah, but it kind of brings us to the last thing that you wanted to talk about tonight, David. Which, we marvel at our own, how significant we are. And here we have this new story about, it's out of New York, I think it is?
Correct. And it's something that, Jeffrey and I have brought up for debate a bazillion times in the Squatchers Lounge podcast, because this is not the first time that they've gone to trial. They've been doing this for over 30 years now, I believe. And finally got a court date, basically. So Stephen Wise and the Non-Human Rights Project is going around and looking at research chimps that do not meet basic standards for life for a chimpanzee, and they're filing for writs of habeas corpus. Basically, they're taking and here's the slippery slope that they're on. They're looking for basically a non-human rights legal personhood, the same kind of personhood that is allowed to a corporation, right?
Right.
So not like, we're not talking human rights, we're not talking like constitutional rights, we're not they don't pay taxes, they don't have to, they don't have to sign up for food stamps. Like this is not what we're talking about here. Right?
These aren't going to be our newest welfare cases, David.
No, this is not but it's by donation. They'll end up at a because they can't be released in the wild, obviously, but they'll end up at a sanctuary to give them the most enriched life that they can outside of once
But the thing that I brought up to you earlier, like my whole problem with this, and it's not that I think that chimps should, be fucking, subjected to tests and all this other bullshit. I totally think that that there's other ways that we can do some things, but at the same time, it's like, hey, if we didn't do a lot of this fucking research, we wouldn't have a lot of the things that we have today. But my problem is, how do you ask the chimp? Hey, do you want to be free? What are you gonna get out of the fucking chimp?
So here's the deal with a legal personhood. They don't have to act as a person, but somebody can sue on their behalf. Basically, and suit isn't the right thing. We're not talking about fucking claim score. Money is not involved here. This is a writ of habeas corpus. This is like if somebody was imprisoned wrongly, somebody would file a writ of habeas corpus.
Right.
So there's nobody filing. The only people filing for this are the lawyers that are doing this, and so it's pro bono work, but there's no kickback at the end. I can't even see where the kickback could come. These are people that just care about this cause and whatnot. So pro bono work, they're going, and for the last 30 years they've been going and saying, so we're filing for a writ of habeas corpus, which was granted for 2 chimps just today, I believe, by a New York Supreme Court. What does that mean? That doesn't mean that they've been given human rights. It does mean habeas corpus is included in human, like the basic, like the 10 or is it there's 20 human rights as delineated by the United Nations, right? There's a 20 basic human rights, inalienable human rights.
Right.
Doesn't even touch the Constitution because that includes habeas corpus as well. But that, so there's Geneva Convention gives, all people, all humans the right to habeas corpus. But that doesn't mean that you are giving chimps human rights by allowing them to have a writ of habeas corpus. That just means that you're allowing them the right to have habeas corpus.
Yeah, and
right?
it's more of a, you have to admit, it's more of a an animal rights thing than it is a human rights thing.
So yeah, so it is, and that's what they're doing. That's why they're talking about a legal personhood, not making them a person per se. The legal personhood applies to fictitious things like corporations and businesses, right? So why not could a legal personhood also apply to like conscious or sentient mammals? They're including whales and elephants and chimpanzees and orangutans and
and I've said many times recently that I think that the Blackfish documentary was they were a little off the mark. They were on the mark, but a little off the mark. It was kind of, it was like
they definitely went on an agenda. It's like any docu's got to go on an agenda.
It was
right?
It was a double-edged sword. Mm-hmm. It got a point across, but and I've said I don't think that whales, any type of whale, I don't care if it's a fucking dolphin, or cetacean, I should say. I don't think any of them should be in captivity. They're not designed to be in captivity. They're designed to be in the open ocean.
Yeah, well, but the difference that the non-human rights project is it's the animals that can tell the difference or that know when they're being held against their will, which will is a really important thing. It's like, I'd rather not be in here. I'm bored. I'm angry, and it's because of you. So I'm going to bite you in half. Or like But so what the Non-Human Rights Project is really going for is in Blackfish. When you have a fish that's obviously but when you have this killer whale that's obviously not with the program, and they're keeping this whale with the program, and people could object, and those trainers who obviously objected could actually sue on behalf for a writ of habeas corpus to take that, like, you're being held against their will. But so the whole thing is there's not a big killer whale rehabilitation center, and you can't just release them into the wild because they might die, right? So what do you do in that situation? And that's a really good question. And that's a question that they've worked on, but for animals, that's why they're going for chimpanzees, because there is a good infrastructure, and they can point at sanctuaries for chimpanzees that have room at the time.
I just think that they seriously need to do away with the cetaceans in captivity. Like it needs to stop. Like they need to stop breeding them in captivity. It's to me, like, I look at a killer whale or orca, whatever you want to call the fucking thing, or a dolphin, and I don't see an animal. I just don't. To me, they're sentient beings. They can learn they can learn languages. We've just fucking learned this, that they can learn fucking languages.
They have different, they absolutely have different dialects. It's like, okay, so the times that we do release killer whales into the wild, we'll take like a killer whale that, because you can't harvest a killer whale for captivity from the Pacific Northwest or the Americas at all. We get them from like fucking Sweden or somewhere, and then you drop them up in the Puget Sound, and they don't know the dialect.
They can't talk to anybody.
They can communicate just fine with the trainers, because the trainers are communicating with them, and they don't know how the fuck to speak Swedish or North American Puget Sound, like Pod 9, like dialect anyway. So the trainers are able to like help them through this learning process of learning what they need to teach them. But you dump them in a different pod, and they can't join up with them because they don't know the dialect. And it's like a big, it's like Lost in Translation, and you end up on the plane home brokenhearted. Except for they die.
Exactly. But like if you stuck me, for instance, in another country that has a language that I don't know, a completely different culture than what I'm used to here, I'd be fucking a mess. Like I wouldn't know what to do. Like I could somewhat communicate with people, and I'm sure I'd have a good idea, but I'd be, without any type of any way to translate, I'd be fucked.
So, like, the interesting thing, though, is, us, like, a highly social culture that we have is similar to a highly social culture that the killer whales have, but you can't expect, how am I going to put this? You can't expect a killer whale to cognitively be able to find the most compassionate. The killer whale will probably find the most compassionate person and try to pair up with them. Try to find simpatico somehow. But they're not going to. They're not going
to have as easy a time as we are.
Yeah, well, but you can't sit down with a person who seems to understand what your problem is, and they're going to teach you a few words so that you can function in that city at that time, right?
No, and but we have learned, though. I mean, granted, like you were saying, you stick these fucking killer whales or whatever in these areas they don't know the dialects. But it brings me back to that story of those, I think it was the killer whales or the dolphins that they can learn each other's language. So it's obvious that orcas can learn another language, so they can adapt. But it's that having to adapt, and they're being forced to adapt because we put them in that situation. It's not because they chose it. Like the killer whale didn't say, "Hey, I'm gonna move to the Puget Sound. This shit isn't for me." And then the killer whale gets there and goes, "Oh, fuck. Like they just get dumped there.
Yeah, well, and they don't have, like, we're talking about all those cultural skills of watching and learning, which the cetaceans do as well. And they don't have so like, I see you eating this quote unquote salmon. What is a salmon? No, it's a salmon, and that's all you eat, motherfucker. So, like, yeah, seals, they're not for you anymore. You're gonna eat this. But so I mean, it's really, I don't know. They're a highly evolved species, and it's not to be taken lightly. But again, what's the same is more important for us to learn about the cetaceans and about the pachyderms and about all these other, like, more complex and emotional and social animals that we're learning about, because it helps us decide how we're different, and that helps to define us as to what it is to be human. Tools is not necessarily a thing. Well, fire is still ours in general, and the complex language and things that we do, like, those are still ours, and that's that's what we're getting down to. And really, when you break it down to its base, like, that's really kind of what we have. I mean, this complex brain that's able to express things and to share them over time, and just, like, rolls up into technology. And once we're able to write it down, once we're able to put it into a database, once we can share it on the cloud, and boom, here we are.
Yeah,
this
and
crazy age, and we're looking back at the last 100 years that it took to get us there, going, holy shit, we really messed some shit up.
But imagine, if you would, for a second, not a human chimp, but a chimpanzee that has evolved to a point where it could function in a human society. And I think we're fucked. If that were to ever occur, which we won't allow it to, we've destroyed too much of their habitat. There's not enough of them left, I don't think, personally. That's my personal opinion. Like, something would have to happen on a global scale to fuck us up, for them to go further in that direction to where they'd be a problem for us. But if chimps got to that point, they're stronger than us. If they got to the point where they were as intelligent as us and could critical think like we do, I honestly think we're fucked in that aspect. Like Planet of the Apes, it would happen.
Yeah. But what you have to remember is
not the rubber face mask ones. Like, I like the newer one.
I like the Charleston Heston. God damn you, you dirty ape!
For my cold dead hands. I taught you how to smile.
But you remember what led them to
damn you, David,
rising up was the fucking fact that we blew it up,
right? And that, like I said, that I think that is what would have to happen in order for them to have their foothold in that way. But they're adapted so well to do what they do. If they adapted in a different way, they're better than us, as far as I'm concerned. Because
so the crazy thing is like, if you look at ourselves as an organism on the planet working within that larger system, what we do, like, we have all of these special abilities, but they're really not, like, we don't have the ability, like, they're like, everything has an ability that's more impressive than, like, they can do that better than us. Like chimpanzees, they can climb. And,
David, it's our egos that make us think we're special.
Well, yeah, like, no, we do some fucking special things. Like, there's some really specialized things that we do, and it all happens in our head. And it's crazy that we're to a point where we can't even, like, allow chimpanzees to be using a spear in our minds, because that encroaches on our speciality. Like, no, it's not our speciality, and we don't make spears anymore. Like they're fashioning it with their teeth. Like, you know, I'm using a folded steel fucking knife, you know.
Yeah, don't fuck around.
Making that spear.
I get a razor blade out.
This has been forged, and it was dropped at my front door by a drone from Amazon that I ordered on my cell phone, right? You know, like this is not what we're, you know, breaking off a stick and chewing on it with our teeth and like stabbing something. This is something very simple, but it's a perfect example of where we came from and the fact that where we are now, it's come so far so fast, and there's so many repercussions of that. It's crazy. And that's it goes to the idea that we are all one system, like in the whole organism thing. I think that maybe if we're all one system and it works in accordance with ourselves, it explains why so many species disappeared and so many this and so many that, is because we ignored that system for so long, because we were so proud of the fact that we could make fire, we could kill shit, and, you know, like do like I'm totally, like, I'm not against hunting or in any way, shape, or form, but I am sorry, we didn't need to kill 400 buffalo per person per year.
Yeah, and
coming across the Midwest, you know.
yeah, and that shit was fucking crazy.
Yeah, so it's those sort of decisions that we made as a you know, the cultural, the wise ape, the Homo sapiens, the wise ape, that are leading to, you know, a gigantic patch of garbage in the ocean that is changing our climate probably as much or more than the amount of fucking CO2 that we put into the air from the processes that we need to make that plastic.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And we need
to look at
we need to start looking at the bigger picture. That's I think that is the lesson, is that we need to start looking at the bigger picture. We're too focused on us.
Yeah, and we're so focused on whether or not a chimpanzee can fashion a spear. You know, it's like, okay, well, you saw this happen 50 times over the course of a 3-month study or something like that. No, that's a thing. Let's just let it be a thing, and it's okay. I've seen so many people arguing against this. It's crazy. You know, like how you showed the monkeys how to do that. Well, you showed the monkey how to rip a branch out of the tree and sharpen it with your teeth real quick. I mean, like,
yeah, I do that often when I go out in the woods, David. I sit down with the animals, and you know, I'm known as the Beast Master.
Beast Master.
Yes, that awful 1980s movie. I carry around
I've seen
two
that
ferrets.
more times than I care to admit. Yeah, Kodo and Poto. Don't even worry about it.
On that fucking note, David, I think we fucking went full circle.
Where did we even go?
All around. That's where we went. We're like fucking Superman flying around the Earth, only we didn't reverse time or destroy all life on the planet, which is what he would have done.
Or did we?
This has been episode 4 of Down the Rabbit Hole with David Batdorf. If you haven't checked
the
out...
name of this episode is Trying to Be John Teeter.
Yeah. If you haven't checked out David's other show that he does with Jeff, it's youtube.com/S-Lounge podcast. David's insight on that show is great. And as always, if you like this shit, hit the like button. If you don't, hit the thumbs down button. Leave a comment. Subscribe. Share it around. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.